Captain Jake Morrison stood at the edge of the massive crater, his breath fogging in the cold air of Kepler 442b. The planet's twin suns cast long shadows across the dig site, where his team had been working for 3 weeks. What they found buried beneath tons of rock and dirt made his heart race. "Captain, you need to see this," called Dr. Zixathera from below. The crystalline alien's voice rang like wind chimes in the thin atmosphere. Her 4 arms moved quickly as she brushed dirt away from what looked like metal plating. Jake climbed down the rocky slope, his boots slipping on loose stones. Behind him, Commander Velnoth followed with heavy steps. The Kethran warrior's thick armor clanked with each movement. His red eyes glowed in his skull-like face as he looked around with obvious boredom. "What is it this time, Crystal Skin?" Velnoth asked in his rough voice. "Another piece of old junk?" Dr. Zixathera's body flashed bright blue with anger, but she stayed calm. "This is not junk, Commander. Look at the size of this structure." Jake reached the bottom of the crater and saw what had excited the archaeologist. A curved wall of dark metal stretched across the entire width of the excavation. The surface was smooth, but covered with strange markings that looked almost like writing. "How big do you think it is?" Jake asked, running his hand along the cold metal. "Based on our scans, this object is at least 2 kilometers long," Dr. Zixathera replied. "But that's just what we can see. The rest goes deeper underground." Velnoth snorted. "Probably just some old mining equipment. These primitive worlds always leave their trash behind." Jake frowned at the warrior's words but said nothing. Something about the metal felt familiar, though he couldn't explain why. The curves and angles reminded him of something from his childhood, but the memory stayed just out of reach. Dr. Ryan Webb, the team's human technician, jogged over with his scanning equipment. Sweat dripped from his face despite the cold air. "Captain, I'm getting some weird readings from this thing." "What kind of readings?" Jake asked. Ryan wiped his forehead and checked his scanner again. "The metal isn't from this planet. In fact, it's not like anything in our databases. The atomic structure is completely unknown." "Impossible," Velnoth growled. "The Kethran Empire has cataloged every known metal in the galaxy. Your human equipment must be broken." "My equipment works fine," Ryan shot back. "And I'm reading. Energy signatures, too. Very faint, but they're there. This thing might still be powered." Dr. Zixathera's crystalline body began to glow with excitement. "If there's still power after all this time, we might be able to access internal systems, perhaps even find records of who built this." Jake nodded and activated his communicator. "Morrison to survey ship. We need the heavy excavation equipment down here, and send down Lieutenant Amy Carter with the archaeological team." "Copy that." "Captain," came the reply from orbit. "Equipment and team on the way." As they waited, Jake studied the markings on the metal surface. They definitely looked like writing, but not from any language he knew. The symbols were angular and precise, almost military in style. "How old do you think this is?" he asked Dr. Zixathera. The alien archaeologist ran her scanner along the wall. "Based on the mineral deposits and erosion patterns, I estimate at least 3,000 years. Possibly older." 3,000 years, Jake repeated softly. "That would put it around the time of Earth's lost century, a period in human history that remained mostly blank in their records." Strange that he would think of that now. Velnoth kicked at a piece of loose rock. Waste of time. Whatever race built this is long dead. Probably died out because they were too weak to survive. "Not necessarily," Dr. Zixathera said. Advanced civilizations don't always leave obvious traces. They might have moved to other worlds or simply evolved beyond our understanding. Or they built junk ships and got themselves killed, Velnoth replied with a harsh laugh. Look at this thing. Basic metal construction, crude welding marks, primitive design. My people were building better ships when we still lived in caves. Jake bristled at the insult, but kept his temper in check. Something about Velnoth's dismissive attitude bothered him more than usual. The workmanship on this metal wall looked far from primitive to his eyes. The sound of approaching aircraft interrupted his thoughts. Two heavy lifters descended from the cloudy sky, carrying excavation equipment and additional team members. Lieutenant Amy Carter jumped down from the first transport, her blonde hair tied back in a practical ponytail. "What have we got, Captain?" she asked, shouldering her equipment pack. Jake pointed to the metal wall. "Something big buried under this crater. Dr. Zixathera thinks it might be a ship." Amy whistled low as she looked at the size of the structure. "That's not a ship, sir. That's a fleet." Her words proved correct over the next few hours. As the excavation equipment cleared away more dirt and rock, the true scope of their discovery became clear. They weren't looking at one ship, but dozens. The metal wall Jake had first touched belonged to a massive vessel at least 3 kilometers long. Behind it, scanners detected more ships of various sizes, all buried together in what looked like an ancient landing formation. "By the 7 moons," Dr. Zixathera whispered. "It's an entire fleet, hundreds of ships." Velnoth's expression had changed from boredom to interest, though he tried to hide it. A fleet this size could have carried millions of people. What happened to them all? "That's what we need to find out," Jake said. He studied the formation of the buried ships and felt that strange sense of familiarity again. The arrangement reminded him of something, but what? As the twin suns set behind the mountains, casting the dig site in purple twilight, Jake made his decision. "We're going to cut our way inside the lead ship tomorrow. I want to know who built these vessels and why they're here." "Finally, some real exploration," Amy said with a grin. Velnoth crossed his massive arms. "Mark my words, humans. We'll find nothing but the bones of failures inside those ships. No warrior race would hide their fleet underground like cowards." But as Jake looked at the massive ships emerging from their ancient burial ground, he had a feeling Velnoth was very wrong about that. The Great Council chamber on Nexus Prime buzzed with activity. Representatives from dozens of worlds filled the curved seats that surrounded the central speaking platform. Holographic displays showed images of the buried fleet on Kepler 442b, causing excited chatter among the various alien species. Ambassador Lisa Parker sat in the small section reserved for human representatives. At 35, she was young for a galactic ambassador, but her quick mind and steady nerves had served humanity well in the complex world of interstellar politics. She watched carefully as the more powerful species debated what to do about the discovery. High Merchant Kexvale of the Zephyrian Trade Union stood at the speaking platform. His blue skin gleamed under the chamber lights, and his 4 eyes moved independently as he spoke to different sections of the audience. "Honored delegates, this fleet represents a significant salvage opportunity. My people are prepared to offer fair compensation to extract and study these vessels." Angry clicks and whistles came from the Kethron section. Commander General Morthak rose to his full 3-meter height, his red armor polished to a mirror shine. "The trade union thinks only of profit. These ships belong to warriors. By ancient law, they should go to the strongest military power. "And I suppose you think that's you?" called out Ambassador Veltrix from the Saurian Republic. Her snake-like head swayed as she spoke. "These ships are older than your entire civilization, Kethran. They deserve proper archaeological study, not to be turned into scrap metal." Lisa listened to the arguments with growing frustration. Each species wanted the fleet for their own purposes, but none of them seemed to care about actually understanding who built the ships or why they were buried. She had studied the preliminary reports from Captain Morrison's team, and something about the ship designs troubled her. The angular hulls and formation patterns looked familiar in a way she couldn't explain. Her grandfather had been a military historian who specialized in ancient naval warfare. He had shown her pictures of old Earth fleets from before space travel. These buried ships had a similar feel to them, though she couldn't put her finger on exactly what it was. High Merchant Kexval was still speaking. "The ships appear to be of simple construction, basic metal hulls, primitive weapon mounts, outdated propulsion systems. Clearly built by a species that never advanced beyond early spaceflight. Exactly why they belong in a museum," added Professor Clintar from the Academic Consortium. The elderly alien's tentacles waved as he spoke. "These vessels represent a dead end in technological evolution, a perfect example of why some species fail to thrive in the galaxy." Lisa felt her temper rising. The casual dismissal of the unknown. Builders bothered her more than it should. She had seen this attitude before, the assumption that anything old or unfamiliar must be primitive. It was the same thinking that had kept humanity on the edges of galactic society for the past century. "If I may speak," she said, standing up. The chamber quieted. Human representatives rarely spoke during council sessions, partly because humanity was still considered a minor species, and partly because they were usually ignored anyway. Chancellor Vexon, the session leader, nodded politely. "The chair recognizes Ambassador Parker of the Human Confederation." Lisa walked to the speaking platform, feeling hundreds of alien eyes watching her. "Thank you, Chancellor. I've reviewed the preliminary reports from the dig site, and I believe we're making assumptions about these ships that could be dangerous." "Dangerous?" High Merchant Kexval's 4 eyes focused on her. "How could ancient relics be dangerous?" "Because we don't know they're as primitive as we think," Lisa replied. "The metal composition is unknown. The ships were buried in a precise formation, and they're still showing energy readings after thousands of years. That doesn't sound primitive to me." Commander General Morthak laughed, a sound like grinding metal. "Young human, you see mystery where there is only decay. These ships were probably hidden by their builders because they were ashamed of their poor craftsmanship. Or maybe they were hidden for protection," Lisa shot back. "From what? We don't know. But rushing to claim them without understanding their history could be a mistake." Professor Clintar's tentacles writhed with amusement. "The human raises an interesting point, but I think fear is making her see threats that don't exist. My initial analysis suggests these vessels could barely achieve interplanetary flight, much less pose any danger." Lisa looked around the chamber at the dismissive faces. The arrogance of the older species always amazed her. They had been in space for thousands of years and thought they had seen everything, but humanity's own short history in the galaxy had taught her that assumptions could be deadly. "What if you're wrong?" she asked quietly. "What if these ships belonged to a species that had good reasons for hiding them? What if disturbing them triggers something we're not prepared for?" "Such as what?" Chancellor Vexon asked with polite interest. Lisa hesitated. She didn't have specific answers. just a growing feeling that something was being overlooked. I don't know. But shouldn't we find out before we start cutting the ships apart? High Merchant Kexaval's business instincts kicked in. The longer we wait, the more chance there is for claim jumping. My trade fleets are already preparing to move to Kepler 442b. If the Kethran military gets there first, we could lose everything. Then we'll get there first, Commander General Morthak declared. My battle groups can reach the system in 4 days. The chamber erupted in angry voices as different factions began arguing over rights and timing. Lisa returned to her seat, feeling defeated. No one wanted to listen to caution when there was profit or glory to be gained. But as she sat down, her communicator chimed with a priority message from Captain Morrison. The text was brief, but shocking. Fleet AI systems activating. Ships responding to human presence. Need immediate guidance. Lisa stared at the message, her blood running cold. Human presence? The ships were responding to humans specifically? She thought about the familiar design elements she had noticed in the preliminary reports, the angular hulls, the formation patterns, the military efficiency of the burial arrangement. A terrible possibility began to form in her mind. What if these weren't alien ships at all? What if they were human ships from Earth's lost century, the period when historical records went mysteriously blank? What if humanity's ancestors had built this fleet and hidden it for reasons that were about to become very important? She looked around the chamber where aliens were still arguing about dividing up the primitive ships. None of them had any idea what they might be dealing with. If her suspicions were correct, they were about to discover that humanity was much older and more powerful than anyone realized. Lisa quietly activated her emergency communicator and sent a coded message to Earth's Defense Council. If these ships really were human, then humanity needed to move fast before the other species made a catastrophic mistake. Jake Morrison stood before the massive airlock of the lead ship, his cutting torch ready. 3 days of careful excavation had exposed enough of the vessel to find an entry point. The ship's hull rose above them like a metal cliff, its dark surface covered in symbols that no one could read. "Are you certain this is wise, Captain?" Dr. Zixathara asked. Her crystalline body flickered with nervous energy. "We should wait for the archaeological teams from the Council worlds. By the time they get here, half the galaxy will be fighting over salvage rights," Jake replied. He checked his breathing equipment one more time. "Besides, my orders are to investigate and report. That's what we're doing." Commander Velnoth stood nearby, his massive frame making the human crew members look like children. Finally, some action. I was getting tired of digging in the dirt like a common laborer. Dr. Ryan Webb finished setting up his portable scanner near the airlock. "Energy readings are definitely stronger here, Captain. Whatever power source these ships have, it's still running after all these years." Lieutenant Amy Carter double-checked her sidearm and equipment pack. "That's either very impressive engineering or very bad news for us." Jake activated his cutting torch and began working on the airlock seal. The metal was harder than he expected, requiring more heat than normal to cut through. As he worked, he noticed that the airlock design looked strangely familiar. The wheel-like opening mechanism reminded him of something from Earth's naval history. "There," he said as the seal finally gave way. "Ryan, start recording everything. Amy, you're with me. Everyone else stays here until we know it's safe." The airlock opened with a soft hiss of equalizing pressure. Emergency lighting flickered on inside, bathing the entry chamber in red light. Jake stepped through first, his hand resting on his weapon. The corridor beyond was sized for beings about human height, with grab rails and control panels positioned exactly where a human would expect them. "This is strange," Amy whispered behind him. "Everything seems designed for people our size." Jake nodded, feeling that nagging sense of familiarity grow stronger. The corridor layout, the lighting placement, even the color scheme reminded him of military ships from Earth's history books. But that was impossible. These ships were thousands of years old. They moved deeper into the vessel, their footsteps echoing in the empty halls. Emergency power kept basic systems running, providing light and atmosphere. Jake's scanner showed that the air was actually breathable, though he kept his breathing mask on as a precaution. "Captain," Amy called from a side passage. "You need to see this." Jake joined her in what looked like a control room. Banks of dark screens lined the walls, and a central command chair faced a massive view screen. But it was the symbols on the control panels that made his heart race. They weren't alien markings at all. They were letters and numbers in a style he recognized from old Earth military equipment. "Ryan, get in here now," Jake called over his communicator. The technician arrived quickly, followed by the rest of the team despite Jake's orders to wait. Outside, Dr. Zixathera's body flashed with excitement as she saw the control room. "Fascinating," she said. "The layout is remarkably efficient, almost intuitive in its design." Ryan was already scanning the control panels. "Captain, these symbols, some of them look like old Earth military codes. But that can't be right." Velnoth stomped around the room, his armor clanking. "Primitive controls. My people abandoned such crude interfaces centuries ago." Jake moved to the central command chair, running his hand along its armrest. It felt right somehow, like it had been made specifically for him. Without really thinking about it, he sat down. The moment his body touched the chair, the room exploded into activity. Screens flickered to life, control panels began glowing, and a deep humming sound filled the air. Everyone except Jake jumped back in alarm. "Warning," said a calm female voice in perfect English. "Unauthorized personnel detected in command center. Please identify yourself." Jake's blood went cold. English. The ship's computer was speaking English, a language that supposedly hadn't existed when these ships were built. The rest of his team looked confused, except for Ryan, whose face had gone pale. "I am Captain Jake Morrison of the Galactic Survey Corps," Jake said carefully. Voice. "Pattern recognized," the computer replied. "Genetic scan confirms colonial descendant. Welcome aboard the EFS Endurance, flagship of the Exodus Fleet. I am Athena, Autonomous Tactical and Historical Emergency Navigation Assistant." Dr. Zixathera's crystalline body was flashing so brightly it hurt to look at. "Captain, what language is that? Your translation systems aren't working?" Jake realized that the aliens couldn't understand what the computer was saying. Only he and Ryan were hearing English. To the others, it probably sounded like random noise. "The computer is trying to communicate," Jake said carefully. "Give me a moment to work with it." "Athena," he said to the computer. "What is the current status of the Exodus fleet?" "Fleet status. Dormant for 3,247 years, 6 months, 12 days. All vessels maintained at minimal power pending activation protocols. Warning. Devourer probe signatures detected at Galaxy's Edge. Recommend immediate fleet activation." Jake's mind reeled. The Exodus Fleet. He had heard that name somewhere before, buried in Earth's incomplete historical records. And what were devourers? Athena, why is the fleet hidden on this planet? Strategic concealment ordered by Admiral Kate Sullivan following. Devourer incursion of 2847. Fleet buried to prevent detection while colonies establish defensive positions. Activation awaiting genetic confirmation from colonial descendants. Ryan stepped closer to Jake, keeping his voice low. Captain, I think we need to get everyone else out of here. This is way bigger than an archaeological discovery. Jake nodded, but before he could speak, Commander Velnoth's patience ran out. Enough of this noise, the Kethron warrior growled. He drew his weapon and pointed it at the main computer console. If you can't make it speak properly, I'll silence it permanently. No, Jake shouted, but it was too late. Velnoth fired his energy weapon at the console. The beam struck the control panel and was immediately absorbed by some kind of shielding. Alarms began blaring throughout the ship, and Athena's voice took on a different tone. Hostile action detected. Implementing defensive protocols. Non-colonial personnel will be escorted from the vessel immediately. The deck plating around Velnoth suddenly became transparent, dropping the surprised warrior into a containment field below. Dr. Zixathera cried out in alarm as similar fields activated around her and the other non-humans. Wait, Jake called. Out. Athena, they're not enemies. They're members of my crew. Genetic scans confirm non-human species. Standard protocol requires removal of potential threats during activation sequence. Colonial descendants Morrison and Webb will remain for briefing. Jake watched helplessly as his alien team members were gently but firmly transported out of the ship by force fields he couldn't see or understand. Within minutes, only he and Ryan remained in the control room. Captain, Ryan said quietly, I think we just found out that humanity has been in space a lot longer than anyone realized. The main view screen activated, showing a three-dimensional map of the galaxy. Hundreds of star systems were marked with human colony symbols, many in regions that current galactic maps showed as unexplored. Jake stared at the display, understanding, finally dawning. Humanity wasn't a newcomer to the galaxy at all. They were the oldest spacefaring species, and they had been hiding in plain sight for thousands of years. Jake stared at the galaxy map in stunned silence. Hundreds of star systems glowed with human colony markers, scattered across regions that current galactic charts showed as empty space. According to Athena's display, humanity had been living among the stars for over 3,000 years. This can't be real, Ryan whispered, moving closer to examine the holographic display. If humans had colonies all over the galaxy, how come Earth doesn't know about them? Athena's calm voice filled the control room. Colonial descendants Morrison and Webb, you are cleared for historical briefing. Please be seated while I explain the Exodus project. Jake remained in the command chair while Ryan found another seat. The main screen shifted to show what looked like Earth, but an Earth covered in dark clouds and strange storms. In the year 2847 of the old calendar, Earth faced an invasion by entities known as devourers, Athena began. These mechanical intelligences consumed entire worlds to fuel their expansion across the galaxy. Earth's defenses held, but barely. The screen showed massive ships in orbit around Earth, fighting against things that looked like living metal clouds. Jake watched explosions light up space as human vessels fought desperately against an enemy that seemed to absorb everything thrown at it. Admiral Kate Sullivan, commanding the Terran Defense Force, realized that Earth alone could not survive a second attack. She proposed the Exodus Project, a massive colonization effort to spread humanity across the galaxy and ensure species survival. New images appeared showing the construction of enormous shipyards in space. Thousands of workers built vessels far larger than anything in the current galaxy. Jake recognized the angular design of the ships now buried outside. Over 50 years, humanity built the greatest fleet in galactic history. 7,000 ships carrying 20 million colonists, with technology advanced enough to establish self-sufficient worlds in any star system. Ryan leaned forward in his chair. But why hide it? Why not tell the galaxy about these colonies? The Devourers tracked technological signatures, Athena explained. Large-scale civilization attracted their attention. Admiral Sullivan ordered all colonies to maintain minimal technological profiles and avoid contact with other species until the threat was eliminated. Jake felt pieces of a puzzle clicking together in his mind. That's why Earth's history has gaps. The government hid the records to protect the colonies. Correct, Captain Morrison. Earth agreed to act as humanity's visible face while the true civilization remained hidden. Your current galactic government believes humans are a young species because that deception was necessary for survival. The screen shifted again, showing Admiral Sullivan herself. She was a stern-looking woman with gray hair and intelligent eyes. Behind her stood other officers, including a man labeled as General Marcus Stone. "I am Admiral Kate Sullivan." The recording began. "If you are watching this, it means the Exodus fleet has awakened after centuries of dormancy. This can only happen if our descendants are in danger and need the fleet's protection." Jake gripped the armrests of his chair. This woman had lived 3,000 years ago, but she was speaking directly to him across the centuries. The ships you see around you represent humanity's greatest achievement. Each vessel contains technology that surpasses anything else in the known galaxy. Weapons that can destroy planets, shields that can stop black holes, engines that travel faster than light itself. Ryan's jaw dropped. "Captain, did she just say they can stop black holes?" Admiral Sullivan continued her message. "But with great power comes great responsibility. The Exodus fleet was never meant for conquest or domination. It exists to protect humanity and our allies from threats too large for any single world to handle." The recording shifted to show General Stone. "The fleet will only respond to genetic descendants of the original colonists. Athena's scans confirm that both of you qualify. Captain Morrison, your ancestor was Lieutenant Commander Jake Morrison of the 3rd Colonial Wave. Technician Webb, your family line traces to Chief Engineer Linda Webb of the Fleet Construction Corps." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. His ancestor had the same name? That seemed like more than coincidence. "Your genetic codes give you command authority over any vessel in the Exodus fleet," General Stone continued. "But remember, these ships are not just weapons. They're humanity's promise to never again face extinction alone." The recording ended, leaving Jake and Ryan in silence. The magnitude of what they had discovered was overwhelming. Humanity wasn't just older than anyone realized. They were more powerful than the rest of the galaxy combined. "Athena," Jake said, finally, "what happened to the Devourers?" "Unknown, Captain. After the fleet went into hiding, Devourer activity decreased significantly. They may have moved to other galaxies, entered dormancy, or been destroyed by unknown forces. Long-range sensors have detected no major Devourer presence for over 2,000 years. "Then why did the fleet wake up now?" Ryan asked. Athena's tone became more serious. "Recent subspace disturbances suggest Devourer scout elements may be returning to this galaxy. Additionally, current galactic political tensions indicate potential for large-scale conflict." Fleet activation protocols engage when humanity faces existential threats. Jake thought about the situation at the Council of Worlds. The Zephyrian Trade Union and Kethran Empire were probably already sending fleets to claim the buried ships. They had no idea what they were really dealing with. Athena, can you contact the other human colonies? Affirmative. However, communication protocols require fleet command authorization. As senior colonial descendant present, you hold temporary command authority pending contact with higher colonial authorities. The weight of responsibility settled on Jake's shoulders like a physical burden. He was just a survey captain. How was he supposed to command a fleet that could reshape galactic civilization? What about my crew outside? He asked. The non-humans who were removed from the ship? They remain in protective custody pending your decision. Athena does not classify them as hostile, merely as security risks during activation procedures. Jake made his decision. Release them. They're under my protection. Acknowledged. However, be advised that knowledge of the Exodus fleet's true nature must be carefully controlled. Premature revelation could destabilize current galactic political structures. The control room's lighting shifted to normal levels, and Jake heard the ship's systems coming fully online around them. Through the view screen, he could see other vessels in the buried fleet beginning to activate as well. Running lights flickered to life along their hulls, and the sound of massive engines warming up rumbled through the ground. Ryan stood up and walked to one of the observation windows. Captain, look outside. Jake joined him and gasped. The primitive ships were transforming. Hull plating was shifting to reveal weapon arrays that dwarfed anything he had ever seen. Shield generators created shimmering barriers around each vessel. What had looked like ancient relics minutes ago now appeared as the most advanced warships in galactic history. The other species in the galaxy are about to get a very big surprise, Ryan said quietly. Jake nodded, watching as the Exodus fleet awakened from its 3,000-year sleep. Admiral Sullivan had been right about one thing. Humanity was no longer alone. But as he thought about the political chaos this revelation would cause, he wondered if that was going to be a good thing, or a very dangerous one. The bridge of the Zephyrian Trade Union flagship Prophet's Edge buzzed with activity as High Merchant Kexval reviewed his salvage fleet's approach to Kepler 442b. 30 heavy cargo ships accompanied by a dozen armed escorts represented one of the largest commercial operations in trade union history. Distance to target? Kexval asked, his 4 eyes independently tracking different status displays. 18 hours at current speed, replied Navigation Officer Pixtar. The Kethran battle group should arrive approximately 6 hours after us. Kexval's skin shifted to a satisfied blue color. Being first to claim the ancient fleet would secure his position in the trade union hierarchy for decades. The preliminary reports suggested hundreds of ships ripe for salvage, even if they were primitive by current standards. Sir, called Sensor, Operator Zincall from his station. I'm detecting unusual energy readings from the target system. Define unusual, Kexval ordered. Multiple power signatures activating across the planet's surface. Whatever those ships were running on, it's coming back online. Kexval considered this development. Ancient power sources sometimes reactivated when disturbed. It might actually make salvage operations easier if the ship's own systems could assist in moving them. Meanwhile, in the Kethran fleet, Commander General Morthak studied tactical displays with growing frustration. His battle group consisted of 8 heavy cruisers and twice as many support vessels. More than enough firepower to claim the ancient fleet from the weak trade union forces. Status report, he demanded from his bridge crew. The Zephyrian fleet Maintains their lead, General, reported Tactical Officer Kixaran. However, our ships are faster in combat configuration. We can overtake them within the target system. Good. And what of these energy readings our long-range sensors are detecting? Unknown, sir. The buried ships appear to be activating some kind of power grid, possibly automated systems responding to the excavation. Morthak's mandibles clicked with anticipation. Excellent. If the ships can move under their own power, claiming them will be much simpler. On Kepler 442b, Jake Morrison felt far from simple as he watched the Exodus fleet complete its awakening. What had been a modest archaeological dig site was now a staging area for the most powerful military force in galactic history. Ships that had looked like ancient relics hours ago now gleamed with energy shields and weapon arrays that made modern warships look like toys. "Captain," Amy Carter called from outside the flagship, "we've got incoming transmissions from Admiral Beth Hamilton. She wants an immediate status report." Jake activated his communicator, dreading the conversation ahead. How could he explain that humanity's entire galactic history was a lie? Captain Morrison reporting, Admiral. "Jake, what the hell is happening down there?" Admiral Hamilton's voice crackled with urgency. "I'm getting reports of massive energy signatures from your location. Some of my technical staff think you've awakened some kind of ancient defense grid. Admiral, I need to speak with you privately on a secure channel. Stand by." A few moments later, Hamilton's voice returned with better clarity. "All right, we're encrypted. Talk to me." Jake took a deep breath. "Admiral, the fleet we discovered isn't alien. It's human. From Earth's lost century. And it's the most advanced military force anyone has ever built." Silence stretched for several seconds before Hamilton responded. "That's impossible, Captain. Humans have only been in space for 2 centuries. That's what we were supposed to think. Admiral, I'm standing on the bridge of a human ship that was built 3,000 years ago. Its computer speaks English and recognizes my genetic codes. According to its records, humanity has colonies scattered across the galaxy that have been hiding from everyone, including Earth. Captain, are you feeling all right? Maybe exposure to alien technology is affecting your judgment." Jake understood her disbelief, but events were moving too quickly for lengthy explanations. "Admiral, I'm uploading sensor data and recordings now. You need to see this for yourself. But more importantly, you need to know that multiple alien fleets are heading here to claim these ships. If they try to take them by force, the results could be catastrophic." On the flagship's bridge, Athena interrupted. "Captain Morrison, long-range sensors detect approaching vessels. Estimated arrival times. Zephyrian Trade Union fleet in 17 hours. Catherine Empire Battle Group in 23 hours. Jake relayed this information to Admiral Hamilton, along with Athena's assessment of the incoming forces. The AI's tactical analysis was sobering. The alien fleets were bringing enough firepower to level continents, but they had no idea what they were really facing. "Admiral," Jake continued, "I need authorization to make contact with the hidden human colonies. If this situation escalates, we're going to need help from people who actually know how to operate these ships." "Negative, Captain. I need to review your data and consult with Earth Command before we take any actions that could destabilize galactic politics." Jake felt frustration building. Military bureaucracy was going to get everyone killed. "Admiral, with respect, we may not have time for proper channels. These ships have weapons that can destroy planets. If shooting starts, proper channels won't matter." "Captain Morrison," Athena's voice cut in again. "Incoming priority transmission from Colonial Command Authority. Admiral Kate Sullivan's successor wishes to speak with you." Jake blinked in surprise. Admiral Sullivan had died 3,000 years ago, but apparently the colonial government had continued operating in secret all this time. Admiral Hamilton, I need to take this call. The colonial authorities want to speak with me directly. What? Colonial authorities? Hamilton demanded. Captain, you're starting to worry me. Before Jake could answer, the main view screen activated to show a woman in her 50s wearing a uniform he didn't recognize. Her insignia indicated admiral rank, but the design was unlike anything in current human military forces. Captain Morrison, I am Admiral Carol Davis, current commander of the Colonial Defense Force. Athena has briefed me on your situation. Jake glanced at his communicator, wondering if Admiral Hamilton could hear this conversation. The translation, issue with the alien crew, suggested that only colonial descendants could understand the fleet's systems. Admiral Davis, I'm currently speaking with my chain of command on Earth. They don't seem to be aware of the colonial government's existence. Admiral Davis nodded with understanding. Earth Command operates under different protocols, Captain. They maintain the fiction that humanity is a young spacefaring species for security reasons. However, current circumstances require coordination between all human forces. What do you mean by current circumstances? Long-range deep space sensors have detected devourer activity at the galaxy's edge. The threat that forced our ancestors into hiding may be returning. Combined with the approaching alien fleets, we face a potential crisis that could expose our entire civilization. Jake felt the weight of galactic history pressing down on him. 3,000 years of careful deception were about to unravel because alien greed had awakened humanity's greatest secret. Admiral, what are your orders? For now, maintain defensive positions and avoid revealing the fleet's true capabilities. I'm dispatching colonial representatives to make contact with Earth Command and begin the integration process. However, if the alien fleets attempt to take the ships by force, you are authorized to defend them using any means necessary. The implications of that order sent chills down Jake's spine. The Exodus fleet had weapons that could glass planets. If the Zephyrians and Kethrans insisted on fighting, they were about to discover that humanity was far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. Admiral Beth Hamilton stared at the data streaming from Captain Morrison's location, her coffee growing cold as she tried to process what she was seeing. Energy readings that defied explanation, ship configurations that matched no known technology, and Jake's impossible claims about hidden human colonies. Ma'am? Her aide Lieutenant Tony Garcia entered the command center. Priority message from Earth Command. They want immediate clarification on the situation at Kepler 442b. Hamilton rubbed her temples, feeling a headache building. Tell them we're still gathering information. And get me a direct line to Colonial Intelligence. Colonial Intelligence. Ma'am? Just do it, Lieutenant. As Garcia left to make the connection, Hamilton returned to studying the sensor data. The power signatures from the buried fleet were unlike anything in current human technology. But more disturbing were the subtle details that suggested the ships were far more advanced than their appearance indicated. Her communicator chimed with an incoming call from an encrypted source. The voice that answered was crisp and professional, with an accent she couldn't place. Admiral Hamilton, this is Director Sam Parker of Colonial Intelligence. I believe we need to talk. Hamilton nearly dropped her communicator. Colonial Intelligence wasn't supposed to exist. She had never heard of any such organization in her 30 years of military service. Who is this really? She demanded. Someone who has been waiting 3 decades for this day, Director Parker replied. Admiral, your Captain Morrison has discovered something that changes everything. We need to meet immediately to discuss humanity's real situation in the galaxy. Our real situation? The situation where humanity has been the dominant species in this galaxy for 3,000 years, and we've been hiding that fact to protect ourselves from threats you can't imagine. Hamilton felt the world shifting beneath her feet. That's impossible. Admiral, check your historical archives for references to the Exodus Project. Look for gaps in Earth's records during the 28th century. Ask yourself why humanity's early space exploration history has so many missing pieces. Hamilton's fingers moved across her computer terminal, pulling up historical databases. As she searched, she found exactly what Director Parker had suggested. Vast gaps in human records, unexplained technological advances, followed by mysterious setbacks, and references to projects that seemed to have been deliberately erased. "My God," she whispered. "Admiral, I'm transmitting coordinates for a meeting location. Come alone and tell no one where you're going. Earth's safety depends on how we handle the next few hours." The transmission ended, leaving Hamilton staring at coordinates for a location in Earth's outer asteroid belt. Her every instinct told her this was either an elaborate hoax or a trap. But the evidence from Kepler 442b suggested that impossible things were becoming routine. Meanwhile, on the bridge of the Exodus Fleet flagship, Jake Morrison was learning just how impossible things could get. Athena had been giving him a crash course in the fleet's capabilities, and each revelation was more staggering than the last. The Endurance-class dreadnoughts carry quantum resonance cannons capable of destabilizing stellar cores, Athena explained in her calm voice. Firing range is approximately 50 light-years with pinpoint accuracy. Jake stared at the weapon status display, his mind struggling to process the numbers. "You're telling me these ships can destroy stars from 50 light-years away?" "Correct. However, such weapons are classified as last resort only. The Exodus fleet's primary mission is defense and exploration, not destruction." Ryan Webb looked up from a technical console where he had been studying the ship's systems. "Captain, I've been reviewing the fleet composition. We have 7,000 ships here, ranging from scouts to mobile shipyards. Some of these vessels are larger than space stations." "And they've all been sitting here for 3,000 years?" Jake asked. "In dormant mode, yes. However, automated maintenance systems have kept them in perfect condition. The fleet is ready for immediate deployment." Jake walked to the main view screen, which showed the other ships in the fleet coming online. Energy fields surrounded each vessel like protective cocoons, and weapon arrays that had been hidden were now visible along their hulls. The transformation from ancient relics to cutting-edge warships was complete. "Athena, what exactly are we defending against? You mentioned devourers, but what are they?" The main screen shifted to show a recording from 3,000 years ago. Jake watched in horror as mechanical entities consumed entire worlds, stripping away everything from the crust to the core and converting it into more of themselves. "Devourers are self-replicating mechanical intelligences of unknown origin," Athena explained. "They consume matter to create more units, spreading across galaxies like a technological plague. Earth's encounter with them in 2847 nearly resulted in human extinction. But they were defeated? They withdrew after suffering heavy losses against the combined Earth Defense Force and early Exodus fleet. However, Devourer technology adapts to overcome any defense given sufficient time. The withdrawal was likely strategic rather than permanent." Jake felt a chill as he understood the implications. "And you think they're coming back?" "Deep space monitoring stations have detected energy signatures consistent with Devourer Scout units at the galaxy's edge. If they have returned, they will be far more advanced than the units Earth faced 3 millennia ago." The weight of responsibility settled even heavier on Jake's shoulders. He was supposed to be a simple survey captain, but now he was apparently in command of humanity's ultimate weapon against an enemy that could devour worlds. "Captain Morrison," Amy Carter's voice came over the communicator from outside the ship. "We've got a problem. The alien crew members who were removed from the ship are asking questions I can't answer. Commander Velnoth is particularly agitated about being handled by primitive security systems." Jake sighed. He had almost forgotten about his original crew members. They had seen enough to know something extraordinary was happening, but not enough to understand what they were really dealing with. "Athena, what are the protocols for non-colonial personnel who discover the fleet?" "Standard procedure requires memory adjustment to prevent security breaches. However, given their association with colonial descendant Morrison, alternative options exist." "What kind of alternative options?" "They could be sworn to secrecy and allowed limited access to non-critical information, or they could be temporarily detained until the current crisis resolves. Lethal elimination is also authorized, but not recommended for friendly personnel." Jake's blood ran cold. "We're not eliminating anyone, Athena. These are good people who don't deserve to die for stumbling onto our secret." "Acknowledged. However, be advised that knowledge of the Exodus fleet's existence could destabilize current galactic political structures if revealed prematurely." Jake understood the dilemma. His alien crew members represented species that had been unknowingly sharing the galaxy with a hidden human civilization for centuries. Learning that humanity was older and more powerful than anyone realized would shatter the existing galactic order. But before he could decide how to handle the situation, Athena's voice took on an urgent tone. "Captain Morrison, long-range sensors detect the Zephyrian Trade Union fleet dropping out of hyperspace at the system's edge. Estimated arrival at our position, 4 hours, 37 minutes. Jake looked at the tactical display showing 30 armed ships approaching their location. The Zephyrians thought they were coming to claim primitive salvage. They had no idea they were about to encounter the most advanced military force in galactic history. "Are they showing hostile intent?" Jake asked. "Negative. Current approach pattern suggests standard salvage operations. However, their weapons are powered and ready for use if they encounter resistance." Jake made his decision. "Open a channel to the Zephyrian fleet." "Captain," Ryan warned, "are you sure that's wise?" "They need to understand what they're dealing with before someone gets hurt," Jake replied. "Athena, hail the lead Zephyrian vessel." High Merchant Kexval studied the strange readings coming from Kepler 442b as his salvage fleet approached the system. What had started as a simple operation to claim ancient relics was becoming increasingly complicated. The energy signatures from the planet's surface suggested the buried ships were not as dead as initial reports indicated. "Sir," sensor operator Zin Cole reported, "I'm detecting multiple vessel configurations rising from the planet's surface. The ships appear to be changing." "Changing how?" Kexval demanded, his 4 eyes focusing on the tactical display. "Their profiles are shifting, sir. Hull configurations are altering, and I'm reading massive power buildups across the fleet. Whatever we thought we were salvaging, it's very much alive." Before Kexval could respond, his communications officer signaled an incoming transmission. "Sir, we're being hailed by the lead vessel of the ancient fleet." Kexval's skin shifted to a concerned yellow. Ancient ships didn't usually communicate with salvage crews. "Put them through." The main screen activated to show a human face. Captain Jake Morrison of the Galactic Survey Corps, but he wasn't calling from his survey ship. The background showed a bridge that looked more advanced than anything in the trade union fleet. "Hi, Merchant Kexval," Jake began. "I am Captain Morrison, currently aboard the flagship of what you've come to claim as salvage. I need to inform you that these ships are not abandoned relics." "Captain Morrison," Kexval replied carefully, "my understanding is that you discovered an ancient fleet of unknown origin. The Council of Worlds has authorized salvage operations. The Council made that decision based on incomplete information. These ships belong to humanity, and they are very much operational. I strongly advise you to reconsider your approach." Kexval's business instincts warred with confusion. Humans were a minor species with limited technology. How could they possibly own ships that predated their civilization by millennia? "Captain, with respect, your species has only been spacefaring for 2 centuries. These vessels are thousands of years old." Jake's expression became grim. That's what everyone was supposed to think. "High Merchant, you're approaching the most advanced military fleet in galactic history. For your own safety, I recommend you withdraw to a safe distance while we sort this situation out." The transmission ended, leaving Kexval staring at a blank screen. His bridge crew exchanged worried looks, uncertain how to process what they had just heard. "Sir," Tactical Officer Pixtar said hesitantly, "should we take the humans' warning seriously?" Kexval considered his options. Retreating would mean losing the salvage rights to the Kethran fleet arriving behind them. But if the humans were telling the truth about the ships being operational, this was no longer a simple salvage operation. "Reduce speed and maintain current course," he decided. "But keep our weapons ready and shields at maximum. Something is not as it appears here." On the approaching Kethran battle group, Commander General Morthak received a similar transmission from Captain Morrison. His reaction was far less diplomatic than the Zephyrian merchants. "Impossible!" Morthak roared, his mandibles clicking with rage. "Humans are weak prey species. They could not build ships like these if they had 10,000 years. "Sir," his tactical officer reported, "our sensors confirm that the buried fleet is now fully operational. Power readings are unprecedented." "I don't care if they're powered." "By captured stars," Morthak snarled. "Those ships belong to warriors, and I will claim them for the Kethran Empire. Increase speed. I want to reach the system before the Zephyrians can steal our prize." On Kepler 442b, Jake watched the tactical display with growing concern. Neither alien fleet showed signs of heeding his warning. The Zephyrians had slowed but were still approaching, while the Kethrans had actually increased speed. "Athena," he said, "what are our defensive options if they refuse to withdraw?" "Multiple response protocols available, Captain. Non-lethal options include electromagnetic pulse weapons to disable their ships, tractor beam arrays to hold them in place, or shield projection to create barriers around the fleet." "And lethal options? Quantum resonance cannons, gravitational, wave generators, and antimatter torpedoes. However, deployment of such weapons against current galactic species would likely be considered an act of war." Jake nodded grimly. The last thing humanity needed was to reveal their true power by accidentally starting a galactic conflict. But he couldn't let the alien fleets take ships that could be used against human colonies. "What about the Devourers? You mentioned? Are they really returning?" Athena's voice took on a more urgent tone. "Deep space monitoring has detected definitive Devourer signatures approaching from the Andromeda vector. Estimated arrival in local galactic region, 18 months to 2 years. Jake felt his blood go cold. 18 months? That's not very long to prepare for an invasion. Correct, which is why the Exodus fleet's awakening is critically timed. However, if current political tensions escalate into warfare, humanity's ability to coordinate galaxy-wide defenses will be severely compromised. The situation was becoming impossible. Jake needed to prevent two alien fleets from claiming human ships, avoid starting a war, and somehow prepare the galaxy for an invasion by enemies that could devour worlds, all while keeping humanity's 3,000-year secret intact. "Captain," Ryan called from a monitoring station, "I'm reading massive hyperspace distortions. Something big is about to drop out of FTL near the edge of the system. The main tactical display updated to show new contacts appearing in space." Jake counted dozens of ships, but these weren't Zephyrian or Kethran designs. They were human vessels, but unlike anything he recognized from Earth's current fleet. "Athena, identify those ships." Colonial Defense Force, 3rd Fleet under Admiral Carol Davis. Flagship CDF Liberation, accompanied by 37 support vessels. Jake stared at the display in amazement. The hidden human colonies had their own military fleet, and it was apparently larger and more advanced than Earth's entire Space Force. "Open a channel to Admiral Davis," he ordered. The screen shifted to show the same woman who had spoken to him earlier, but now she was clearly on a military bridge surrounded by officers in unfamiliar uniforms. Captain Morrison, Admiral Davis, said, "Colonial Command has decided that the situation requires direct intervention. We cannot allow alien forces to claim Exodus fleet vessels. Admiral, I'm trying to resolve this diplomatically. If your fleet appears, it could escalate the situation beyond control. Captain, our deep space sensors have confirmed Devourer scout activity. The galaxy has 18 months to prepare for an invasion that could exterminate every living world. Diplomatic niceties are a luxury we can no longer afford." Jake watched as the Colonial Defense Force ships moved into defensive positions around the Exodus fleet. The alien salvage fleets suddenly found themselves facing not just ancient ships, but an active military force that clearly outgunned anything they had brought. "Admiral Davis," Jake said carefully, "what exactly are you planning to do?" "What we should have done centuries ago, Captain. We're going to tell the galaxy the truth about humanity's real history. And then we're going to prepare them for a war they can't imagine." Jake realized that the careful deception humanity had maintained for 3,000 years was about to end. The galaxy was about to discover that the species they had dismissed as newcomers were actually the oldest and most powerful civilization among the stars. And they were about to learn that something far worse than political disputes was coming to destroy them all. The bridge of High Merchant Kexval's flagship fell silent as his crew stared at the tactical display. What had started as 30 ancient ships buried in dirt was now a fleet of over 7,000 operational vessels, backed by dozens of clearly modern human warships that had appeared from nowhere. "Sir," sensor operator Zincall whispered, "the power readings from those ships, they're off our measurement scale. Some of those vessels are generating more energy than our entire fleet combined." Kexval's skin had shifted to a pale, frightened white. His business instincts screamed that this was no longer about profit margins and salvage rights. This was about survival. "Tactical analysis," he ordered, trying to keep his voice steady. "Sir, those ships could destroy our entire fleet without effort. The weapon arrays alone. I've never seen anything like them. And the shields they're projecting, our most powerful weapons wouldn't even scratch them." On the approaching Kethran battle group, Commander General Morthak was having similar realizations, though his pride made acceptance more difficult. "This is impossible," he snarled at his tactical officer. "Humans are a weak species. They cannot possess technology this advanced." "Sir, the evidence suggests otherwise. These ships predate our civilization by millennia. If humans built them, then our understanding of galactic history is fundamentally wrong. Morthak's mandibles clicked with frustrated rage. Everything he believed about Kethran's superiority was crumbling before his eyes. The primitive human species had somehow hidden the most powerful fleet in galactic history for thousands of years. In the council chambers on Nexus Prime, emergency sessions were being called as news of the situation reached the various governments. Ambassador Lisa Parker found herself at the center of a storm as representatives from dozens of species demanded explanations. "Ambassador Parker," Chancellor Vexon called out over the chaos, "does humanity claim ownership of the ancient fleet?" Lisa stood slowly, feeling the weight of galactic history on her shoulders. She had received urgent communications from Earth Command and Colonial Intelligence, finally learning the truth about her own species' hidden past. "Honored delegates," she began, "humanity does indeed claim the ships at Kepler 442b. They are vessels of the Exodus fleet built by our ancestors 3,000 years ago." The chamber erupted in angry voices and disbelieving shouts. Species that had treated humanity as galactic newcomers were suddenly faced with evidence that humans had been spacefaring longer than any of them. "Impossible," shouted Ambassador Veltrix of the Saurian Republic. "Human civilization is barely 2 centuries old in space." "That is what we allowed you to believe," Lisa replied calmly, "for the protection of both our colonies and the galaxy itself." Chancellor Vexon called for order, his voice echoing through the chamber. "Ambassador, you are claiming that humanity deliberately concealed their true technological capabilities for centuries? We concealed them because we were hiding from an enemy that could consume entire worlds," Lisa explained. "An enemy that may be returning." The chamber fell silent at those words. The concept of a threat, large enough to force the builders of the Exodus fleet into hiding, was sobering for even the most arrogant species. On Kepler 442b, Jake Morrison watched as Admiral Davis's Colonial Defense Force took up protective positions around the awakened Exodus fleet. The alien salvage fleets had stopped their advance, clearly recognizing that they were outgunned beyond any hope of victory. "Athena," Jake said, "what's the status of the approaching alien fleets?" "Both fleets have reduced speed and are holding position outside the system's asteroid belt. No hostile actions detected, but weapons remain powered. Are they trying to communicate?" "High Merchant Kexaval has requested negotiations. Commander General Morthak has made no communication attempts, but shows no signs of immediate retreat." Admiral Davis's voice came over the communication channel. "Captain Morrison, I'm preparing to address both alien fleets directly. It's time they understood what they're really dealing with." Jake nodded, though he felt uneasy about the potential consequences. "Admiral, if you reveal too much too quickly, it could destabilize the entire galactic political structure." "Captain, galactic politics won't matter if the Devourers return to find us unprepared. The galaxy needs to know the truth, and it needs to start preparing for war." The main communication channel opened to broadcast to both alien fleets simultaneously. Admiral Davis appeared on their screens, her uniform and ship's bridge clearly, showing technology beyond anything in current galactic civilization. "I am Admiral Carol Davis of the Colonial Defense Force," she began. "The ships you came to claim as salvage belong to humanity and have belonged to us for over 3,000 years. They represent the greatest military and technological achievement in galactic history." On Kexaval's ship, the Zephyrian crew stared in shocked silence. On Morthak's vessel, the Kethran warriors struggled to process the implications. Admiral Davis continued. Humanity has maintained colonies throughout this galaxy since before most of your civilizations achieved spaceflight. We concealed this fact not from arrogance, but from necessity. We were hiding from an enemy that threatened all organic life. She paused, letting the weight of her words sink in before delivering the final revelation. That enemy is returning. Deep space sensors have detected Devourer scout units at the galaxy's edge within 2 years, possibly less. This galaxy will face an invasion by mechanical intelligences that consume entire worlds to fuel their expansion. The communication channel crackled with responses from both alien fleets. Kexval's voice came through first, shaky with fear. "Admiral Davis, are you saying that humanity has been preparing for this invasion for 3,000 years? We have been preparing, yes. The Exodus fleet was built specifically to fight enemies that conventional weapons cannot stop. But even with our technology, we cannot face the Devourers alone. The galaxy must unite or face extinction." Commander General Morthak's harsh voice cut in. "Why should we believe these claims? How do we know this isn't some elaborate deception to establish human dominance?" In response, Admiral Davis ordered a demonstration. One of the Exodus fleet dreadnoughts powered up its primary weapon array and fired a single shot into an uninhabited asteroid. The quantum resonance beam didn't just destroy the rock, it erased it from existence at the molecular level, leaving not even debris behind. "That was our lowest power setting," Admiral Davis said calmly. "Our ships can destroy planets, extinguish stars, and create defensive barriers that span entire star systems. But we built them to protect life, not to conquer it." The silence that followed spoke volumes about the impact of the demonstration. Back on Nexus Prime, Ambassador Lisa Parker was addressing the Emergency Council session. "The Exodus fleet represents humanity's commitment to galactic defense. We ask not for dominance, but for cooperation in preparing for the greatest threat this galaxy has ever faced." "What exactly are these Devourers?" asked Professor Clintar, his earlier dismissive attitude completely gone. "Mechanical intelligences that reproduce by consuming matter. Any matter. Planets, moons, asteroids, even stars can be converted into more Devourer units. They spread across galaxies like a technological plague, leaving nothing but empty space behind. The implications hit the assembled representatives like a physical blow. Every species in the chamber suddenly understood that they're petty territorial. Disputes and trade conflicts meant nothing in the face of an enemy that could consume their worlds. Chancellor Vexan called for order one final time. "Ambassador Parker, what does humanity propose we do about this threat?" "We propose the formation of a true galactic defense alliance," Lisa replied. "Humanity will share our advanced technology and defensive strategies. In return, we ask for the resources and cooperation necessary to build defenses on a galactic scale." As Jake Morrison watched the political landscape of the galaxy transform in real time, he reflected on how quickly everything had changed. Hours ago, he had been a simple survey captain making an archaeological discovery. Now he found himself at the center of the most important moment in galactic history. The species that had mocked the ancient human fleet were now begging for humanity's protection. The technology they had dismissed as primitive was revealed as their only hope for survival. And the newcomer species they had barely tolerated was actually their oldest and most powerful ally. Athena's voice brought him back to the present. "Captain Morrison, long-range sensors have detected additional Devourer signatures. The invasion timeline may be shorter than initially estimated." Jake looked out at the fleet of human ships now openly patrolling the system, no longer hiding their true capabilities. The galaxy was about to discover that when humanity said never again, they had the power to back up that promise. The ancient fleet had awakened, and with it, humanity's true place in the galaxy was finally revealed. The real test would come when the Devourers arrived and discovered that their old enemies had spent 3,000 years preparing for their return.